Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, James.
And good morning, everybody. Hopefully, again, you are all having a great weekend or a great week whenever it is that you are listening. So this week, we are pre-recording our Vibes Sunday episode. It is actually Thursday as we speak now. Now, I know you will be listening post-Sunday or Sunday itself. But Anne has requested that we sit down together on VE Day, Thursday of this week, which is as we speak now. And would you like to explain, Anne, a little bit why you would like to talk now and take it from there?
Yes, I would like to talk now. It's because I feel very, very strongly that the men who fought for world peace and for righteousness, really, are getting forgotten.
Okay.
VE Day should be a special day for everybody. But I was in Costco yesterday and listening to two of the girls who were stacking up the shelves and things talking. I was just choosing something and they were talking, the staff, and one of them was saying it's VE Day tomorrow, and the other one said, "What's that?"
Okay.
And I was shocked. These weren't young girls, these were women who were doing it. And she said, "What do you mean VE Day?" And the other lady said, "It's about the war." I didn't say anything through this conversation, by the way. It's about the war. So the other lady said, well, why are we doing it? So I'm listening to the conversation and my heart sank, to be honest, because, and it does bother me, because the other lady said, well, my granddad fought in the war.
Yes.
And she said, and he was only 17. He went in at 17 and didn't come back. And
yes.
And she said, I think we should be, recognising the men that did fight for peace. And she said, and that you don't know anything about it. It was surprising her, it was also surprising me. So that was the first part of it that I thought, and I hadn't thought about it before, people are forgetting.
Yes.
Because as a nation, and I'm talking about as a British nation, we're not proud. I don't see pride. I don't see pride in our country. I don't see pride in actions. Whereas I used to see pride. I used to see people standing up. And this year they didn't actually want the men who are in the 90s now to go across the sea on VE Day.
Okay.
They were trying to stop it. The government were trying to stop it.
Right.
How bad is that these men who are now in the 90s and can remember every single feeling that they had?
I think some of them are actually over 100 years old now.
Yes.
Respectfully, in terms of some of the
and
servicemen.
Still compass mentence, the ones that have heard speaking.
I didn't know or haven't heard about the channel crossing or the cancelled channel crossing over to France.
They normally go,
yes. So you're right.
It was one of my clients today was talking about it, and we were both, and he also is in his 80s.
Right.
And we were both talking about the war. It's the war years themselves.
Yes.
And we were saying about the VE street parties, that everybody had a street party for victory.
Yes.
And now people don't realise that was for victory even. And I find this sad that our children are not being taught pride. They should have pride. We should be brought up with pride in our countries, pride in ourselves, pride in our education system. But where there's not pride, we start losing, don't we? And we're losing the standards. And I'm talking about standards now in general.
I agree with you. I feel the word pride sometimes has a little bit of a double entendre and isn't always applicable. But in the context and the way that you mean it, I fully understand, and I am sure everybody listening fully understands the way that you mean it. But a self-respect and a self-worth, and a value of who we are and what we stand for, and that we stand behind our actions and we take accountability for our choices, and we point in a direction, and that direction we feel at peace with, we feel a sense of alignment with our choices together. And that gives people a sense of what you are calling pride.
Yes.
A sense of things may not be the way they could be, but people are recognising they are doing their best, and that things are pointing in a certain direction, and that direction is good. And I feel you're saying that is no longer true collectively for these isles and potentially the world. I also think the reality of lived history, in terms of living history, it does age. And as the generation and as the people who were directly involved pass, it becomes removed. And that has a natural occurrence. There is an element that happens organically with that. Just like all of the historical events that preceded the Second World War and the First World War become history, because the people that lived it and are living directly related to it, they do pass. So that element is natural. But what is our story today? What are we standing up for today? What did those people fight for, survive for, and were victorious for? What was it about? And have we lost that? And are we then in a no man's land, pardon the pun? Or can we remember? That's what I feel is not all of what we are discussing or what you have brought up this morning, but certainly it is such a pertinent part of it. What is our story today? What do we stand for? Which direction are we going?
Without history, we don't have a story.
I'm not saying that history is remiss.
Yeah,
I'm saying that the people living connected to certain events
Yeah.
naturally pass. Therefore, it becomes written history.
Yes.
It becomes removed, once removed, twice removed, 3 times removed.
Yes.
It becomes inevitably a story.
But we also are not having written history nowadays. People are not speaking about the history. But we're talking about a war to end wars, to bring peace to a country. And we've got more wars at the moment than we've had for a long time. But we seem, and remember, this is only me with my feelings, it's not anybody else's. But what I can't see is I can't see compassion, whether it's in war, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's within teaching. We seem to be losing compassion.
I agree with you.
And that's the part that's really worrying me, because without compassion, we can't have humanity. We can't be human without some compassion. We've watched the Conclave.
We watched the new Pope present himself to the world.
The Conclave, yeah. So we've watched it to see how he was elected. And as you know, and I'm saying that they don't know, but you know, we watched the film a couple of weeks ago without knowing this was going to happen.
Yes, it's a fascinating film with Ralph Fiennes in, British actor, called Conclave, which is such a fascinating film because it mirrors precisely the events of the last month, really.
Yes.
Not in specific detail. Obviously, it's a dramatisation, it's fiction, but the actual process of how the Roman Catholic Pope Pontiff is chosen, elected, and everything that potentially goes on behind the scenes. It's such a fascinating watch, and I'm sure lots of people out there have tuned in to watch the film. I think it came out 2-3 years ago, something like that. It was critically acclaimed, and I feel a number of the leading actors were nominated for the Academy Award. So it was a really powerful, successful movie.
Yes. And it made you feel.
Yes, it was fascinating. It really was a fascinating watch, and obviously, and then in reality, this evening, Thursday, as we record now, the new pontiff, the new pope of the church, has presented himself.
So mainly because of the film as well, we were very interested and waiting to see who came out on the balcony.
Yes.
But seeing those, I don't think they said how many thousand people were there.
50,000 plus at the time
50,000
of
plus.
watching, something like that. Obviously, I would imagine millions watching around the world, and with all of the news outlets, there's over 1 billion Roman Catholics in the world.
Yes, and my feeling, and I did mention it to James, and remember again, these are my feelings, not anybody else's. My feeling was, why is that man who has power, so much power, why didn't he just stand and say, please hold hands now and let us be together for peace, let us stop all these wars? That's where compassion comes into it for me, that I would have loved to have seen that all those people became one.
If I am honest, well, firstly, in essence, I agree with you, Anne. I think we're past compassion in terms of a leader. I think we need to drop the com.
Yeah,
I think it's about time somebody stood up and spoke with passion.
Yes.
Not just wishfully or willfully.
Not from a page.
Which are necessary, whimsically almost wishing for peace. We should demand peace, we should act peace, and we shouldn't stop until it comes about. And how can we, and I mean this with the highest of respect, my family are deeply connected to the events of the Second World War. As I'm sure many of your families listening, it's our collective story in terms of the British Isles, or one of our main threads of story and meaning in our lived history and in our lives today. So it's of deep respect to me in terms of I can only express my deepest gratitude and respect to everybody from that time and around the world. And I sincerely mean that. But how can anybody today, and for a long time now, claim victory of any kind when still there is war across our world? How can anybody claim victory in any continent, anywhere today, and for a long time now, where children are not safe, where there are children across every continent of this world whose lives are torn apart by family and friends, by schools, by systems that should protect them, by war, by famine, by displacement, by trafficking, by drugs, by gangs, by corruption of all kinds, by the apathy and the willful apathy of millions, potentially billions of people who do not act upon what they say they care about. How can anybody wave a flag and say victory? There is no victory until every single child on this earth is safe, and I mean truly safe, from the abuse and the abuse of power by individuals and by systems across our world. So I respect what's happened, and we must remember what was stood for, that tyranny and fear and control and wickedness and evil did not take the world.
No.
But it was not vanquished. It was a momentary victory that should have been rightly celebrated, and we should use as inspiration, but it has passed. And there is not victory today, and there will not be victory until every single human being across our earth, every continent, every nation, every tribe, every person stands side by side in goodness for humanity, with humanity, and if for no other reason, for every single child on our earth.
Yes,
and it is as simple as that. And I yearn for anybody in any position of power, linked to any faith, linked to any position of influence or authority, to speak with some passion and power and speak from the heart and put some actions behind your words and show you care and unite people.
Today, when, as I say, I was talking to one of my clients who came to me, a man who is in his 80s, and we started off by talking in general, in a way, and he was talking about the shells from the bombs.
Yes.
That's what he was talking about. First of all, it started with that. And then I said to him, when you go to Lytham, St Anne's, there's a park.
Yes, I know it very well.
Yeah, we do know it very well. Where you walk around, and it's where the sea comes to a lake.
Yes.
And it's a really lovely place to go to. But in the middle of this park, there is a Spitfire, I think it is.
Yes.
A Spitfire, and at the side of the Spitfire is one of the shells.
Yes.
So, And when we were walking around and I saw this Spitfire, I was shocked. I was really shocked. I didn't say anything. But at one point, and I have spoken about it on here, I think, is that I saw one of the Spitfires coming over,
Yes.
and he waved to me.
Yes, I remember.
And I thought,
you talking about this, and I think you're right. I think you have spoken about this on a podcast.
And people would say to me, "How could you see him?" I said, "I could see him."
Yes.
And then when I saw the Spitfire, I realised why I could see him, because it's just the cockpit.
Yes.
Which is all just covered in glass, I suppose, in those days. I don't know.
Yes, it was
But
glass.
the cockpit is there, and there's only him sat in it, so you can see him fully.
Yes.
But it was so tiny. This plane looked so tiny, because I'm used to the planes as they are now, and I couldn't get over how tiny it was. And I remember thinking, why is it that tiny? Next to it was the shell of one of the bombs. And I thought, that's tiny as well. Why is that so tiny? How did that small thing do all the damage it did? And I remember all this going through my mind.
Yes.
As I was looking at it. And then I realised I was tiny.
You were.
So I'm about 4 or 5 at that time when I saw him wave to me.
Yes.
So to me that would look massive, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And when my mother looked up and realised it wasn't, and dragged me home and under the table. But history itself, when we're looking at history ourselves sometimes, things seem enormous.
Yes.
And enormous events.
Yes.
When they probably weren't enormous events.
They could just be a paragraph in a future history textbook.
Yes.
Just a paragraph, or maybe even a sentence, like some of the world events are in some of the history textbooks, or myth or legends that are spoken about today, that have a thread of truth that connect back to a time beyond time, beyond time, beyond time, of which was so important to so many people.
So that takes
It's quite humbling in a way, isn't it?
It's really humbling, but that takes me to the feeling of that in ancient times, because there was no written word like there is, and it's too much now, the written word, with messages and things like that, that when there was no written word, the passion of people telling tales.
The art of storytelling.
The art of it, and the excitement when you're listening.
Yes.
We're losing that, aren't we?
We are losing the oral tradition, yes. And I feel in modern terms, until recently, with the upsurge of podcasts, and here we are, Anne, the decline of radio, I feel, has been such a tragedy, really, because the spoken word and the oral tradition, there's something so intimate and powerful and beautiful about it.
Yes.
It's such a personal form of communication. It's potentially my favourite form of communication, to be honest with you, dependent upon the situation.
Because it's like a book. You've got to use your imagination when you're talking.
Yes.
So it's no different. So people read audiobooks now.
Listen to audiobooks.
Listen to them, I should say.
Yes.
So that they can get the excitement from that. I read because I can build up my own story.
Yes.
Those are two arts we're losing, aren't they?
Well, there is a renaissance. You're right, generally. I do agree with you. There is a renaissance of podcasts. So more people now are digesting content audibly. So they're listening to news, entertainment, audiobooks, music. And I do feel that holds some benefit, potentially great benefit. Interestingly, before I forget, you often speak about, or have spoken about, your childhood brilliantly, fascinatingly, importantly. But to link it to my life, and I rarely speak about events in my life, and certainly not necessarily this morning, but Lytham St Anne's, that's where I'm originally from. And I have walked around that park that you have spoken about many times with my grandparents, who aren't from there, they're from Liverpool, but my grandfather was in the war. He was very, very young, so I don't know how he got in the war, but he was, and he ended up in the Navy and was involved in the war. And all throughout his time with me and subsequent time that I have spent with him, he has told me many a story about the war. So it's very important to me. I know personally the Park and the Spitfire that you have spoken about. And
But imagine that war at sea.
yes,
The fear in the middle, your granddad in the middle of an ocean with no protection whatsoever. Can't hide, and you're being shot at, and you've got submarines underneath.
yes, he told me about many a story, to be honest with you. He was a signaller, and I think he was involved in quite a few battles. I think the largest one was the Battle of the Atlantic, which was a very famous war battle, marine battle that took place in the Atlantic Ocean. And my grandfather was a signaller, so he manned a light at the front of the boat, and that would signal to incoming attacks or to other boats.
And send messages.
Yeah, send messages. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. I hope that I am doing him and all those involved justice. I do, yes. I do remember him telling me that he was very young, very, very young, and it was very terrifying at times. But he also spoke, I can remember clearly him speaking about the excitement of it, which I know sounds a bit perverse. And it wasn't a sadistic excitement at the thought of hurting anybody, but the excitement of being around with other young people, predominantly young men, and the camaraderie and the togetherness, and in real dire straits and potential danger, fatal danger, how close they got. And I do know that it's often said, or has been said in history, that people feel most alive. That there are quite a few accounts of people who have been involved in warfare, either directly or indirectly, but affected by direct warfare, feeling they're most alive. Often people can say that they are most alive, that their senses become heightened at the possibility of death and the uncertainty of tomorrow, and how that can bring a clarity of thought, and how priorities become clear, and how people's lives and meaning become very, very vivid. And based upon that, my grandfather often spoke to me passionately and honestly. He made it clear to me from his understanding, from what he saw and what he was involved in. He said in simple terms what they were aware of and what they felt like, that it was good against evil. And there was a force trying to take the world that they didn't understand. And there was something inside that meant that they were prepared to do anything to stop that force. And for him, on a basic level, that's the best that he could describe, that he felt it was very much to do with good.
Yes. Which is why so many very young men did enrol, and they shouldn't do, in the army. 16-year-olds gave wrong ages.
And absolutely. And the feeling was, and he did speak to me about this a number of times, was an existential threat that they felt, that if they didn't succeed and the forces of good didn't succeed, that it would not be retrievable. It didn't feel like a situation where it could go one way or another, but through the passing of time, it could alter itself, in terms of if the axis of evil, as it is called, as far as in the West we call it, in terms of if the other side had been victorious and continued in their domination, it wouldn't have been a retrievable situation. It really felt like the end. And my grandfather made that very clear. It wasn't just a war to them. It was the future of life. It was the future of humanity. And that they were standing up for everything. It really felt like everything. And he drummed it into me. And it was so important that it must never be forgotten. But he also spoke a little bit, and I suppose that's where the beginning shoots of framing what I'm saying, or at least some real-time context, people who really lived in it, personal to me, was that it wasn't fulfilled.
No.
He was very clear about that the wars still rumbled on, both in terms of after VE Day, because that was only by name victory in Europe, so there was still
my dad
the
was
world
still
at war.
fighting in Jerusalem then.
There was a brief period of relative peace during the 1950s and early 60s, before I think the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War sort of coming to fruition. There was a brief period which was potentially the golden age, which you've spoken about,
have, yes.
the excitement, rock and roll baby, and colour and life coming. But he was very clear to me, and that what they fought for held off what was trying to take over, but it was not complete and utter victory. That war and the possibility of war remains, and we see that today.
But
we
we're
see
at
that today
stage
increasing.
now. We're actually there now. In my opinion, we're at that same stage as we were in 1940. But on a lighter note of the war itself, is I had Bill here today for an appointment with me. Ken Barlow. Everybody, most of you are on this. know Bill.
Yes,
you all
Bill.
know Bill.
Yes.
And Bill today, it seems, he went to London to do a recording at the weekend.
Yes.
For VE Day today.
Oh, wow.
So he's been on television today. I haven't seen him, and I don't even watch Coronation Street.
I hope this isn't a spoiler, Anne.
It's not a spoiler, no.
Okay.
So he said that they asked him what it was like for him, because Bill's 93 this year.
Wow.
And
he's amazing, isn't he?
He is amazing,
He is
yes.
amazing.
And they asked him how he felt on VE Day.
Yes.
Well, Bill was sent to a boarding school in Ross-on-Sea.
Ross-on-Sea.
Ross-on-Sea, yes. In Ross-on-Sea.
Yes.
So he was sent there as an 8-year-old child.
Yes.
Because to get away from the area he was in, because it was being bombed. And he went to boarding school. And he said what he remembers of VE Day was the boarding school took them all out.
Yes.
For the day. They took them into Old Colwyn, into Llandudno. Took them into Llandudno and gave them cream cakes. And that's all Bill remembers.
So he had a great time.
He had a great time. He had cream cakes. So he said, and he doesn't remember fear as a child.
And that's a
in
good
the war.
thing in that context.
And like I've said many times, I don't remember any fear. I remember the war very clearly.
Yes.
I remember the actions. But I was saying to the other man today, who was in his 80s, what I do remember are noises. And those noises still frighten me.
Yes.
So the noise of the sirens still frighten me.
Yes, you have spoken about this before.
Yeah, so
it's very interesting.
There's certain noises that make my stomach turn over. But that, I realise now, that's the fear of the other people. So when the doodle bombs were coming down, it was the fear of whoever was with me who stopped and grabbed hold of my hand. I didn't know why. So there's many, many emotions, isn't there?
There
and
is.
I think, so that's why I'm started today off to say, this day should still be very, very important. And it's. I don't feel that today. I don't think people
I agree with what you're saying, and we've both spoken passionately and honestly about how we feel, and it is quite raw, isn't it? It is VE Day
it's raw
today.
for me, yes.
And I know a number of you listening do have family members, fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers who were directly, and grandmothers. Let's remember that the women were also directly involved and played as important role as anybody else.
They kept this country going.
Absolutely. So let's respect what was given, and let's show our gratitude and what was upheld for peace, for freedom, for liberty, for goodness, and for the world.
Yes.
Let us fulfill that now. So we have the opportunity to mark VE Day and to mark the sacrifice that was given with respect. So I invite everybody listening to be reflective and to take stock of who we are and where we can go. And let's be inspired. Let's be inspired by our relatives, by each other's relatives, by our collective story. And let's not forget that goodness did prevail and is needed to prevail again.
And can I just ask that anybody who is listening, who feels, and I'm not saying unless they feel, if you feel the same way as I feel, please stand for 2 minutes now. Or just sit for 2 minutes.
Yes.
And acknowledge.
Yes.
That does show your acknowledgement of it. And that's what we need now. We need acknowledgement of these incidents and these people. So it won't happen again.
Yes. Hear, hear. Okay. Well, a passion-filled Thursday/Sunday morning, Anne.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all for listening, everybody. Yes. And I know how deeply personal today is for so many of you listening, and thank you to everybody, really.
Yes.
I think gratitude is a really good place for us to finish.
Yes, so do I.
Well, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And we look forward to being with you and speaking with you again next week when we will be back
On Sunday.
recording on Sunday. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.